My husband brought two strangers into our home. I thought it was a twisted joke until he poured the wine and said, "You wanted more. Now watch yourself become everything you feared." I recall how his eyes moved, neither in anger nor in sorrow, but in a state of bewilderment. That moment in our bedroom marked the inception of a blaze that neither of us would ever extinguish. David had just finished, and as was my custom, I found myself gazing at the ceiling, not from a place of satisfaction, but rather from a profound emptiness, the sort that accumulates silently like dust in the neglected corners of one's thoughts. I stood there, anticipating the weight of guilt to engulf me, yet instead, I met his gaze unwaveringly and uttered the words that would alter the course of our lives forever. "You fall short." And in that moment, I wasn't just speaking to him. I was releasing years of silence in a single sentence. He blinked, once, then twice. He slipped his boxers back on and settled onto the edge of the bed. He stood with his back to me. He remained silent. He remained stoic. He merely stated, "Then I shall seek out someone who is embraced, my cherished community. Your presence is acknowledged. I understand your feelings. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you, particularly to those who return time and again, sharing your insights and igniting this channel with your passion and warmth. To all my new and returning viewers who have yet to subscribe, I invite you to click that button now. This is the soul fuel that energizes this realm. Each subscription, each comment contributes to the tapestry of this expanding family. Share your reflections immediately following this captivating introduction. I am eager to know your thoughts on the recent events. Allow me to guide you further into the depths. Our journey together spanned 12 years of marriage. For 12 years, a serene and cozy existence unfolded, marked by an emotional detachment. David was the sort of man who settled his bills ahead of time, arranged intimacy for Sundays, and bestowed gentle kisses on my forehead rather than my lips. I made an effort. Heaven knows I made every effort. I acquired some new lingerie. I dispatched some tantalizing messages. I found myself engrossed in online tutorials on the art of seduction for my husband, even after a decade of marriage. Nothing seemed to yield results. In a home brimming with sustenance, I found myself ravenous, yet disinterested in the very meals that surrounded me. Thus, I uttered it. After one of his typical 3-minute sessions, he disengaged from me like a weary employee finishing their shift, rolled over, and switched on ESPN. I gazed at his back and murmured, "David, you no longer suffice for me." Initially, he interpreted my words as a plea for emotional connection, yet perhaps I was yearning for additional dates, deeper affection. However, I was explicit in expressing that my needs extended beyond the emotional realm, reaching into the intimacy of the bedroom. And not merely diversity. I craved fervor, strength, authority, an essence untamed, a spirit unrestrained, a primal force. He rose silently and made his way to the bathroom, leaving me with the impression that this was the end. Perhaps he would at last seek a divorce. Perhaps he would consider moving out, yet David envisioned an alternative plan. 2 nights later, I entered our living room and beheld them. Jason Tyrone, 2 unfamiliar men with commanding presence, sat confidently in our living room, their presence engineered to shift something between us. It didn't feel real. Not the men. Not David. Not the version of me, who just stood there, breathless. Jace bore tribal tattoos that adorned his arms, his gaze deliberate and penetrating. Jordan donned a gold chain, his thick beard elegantly framing a sharply defined jawline. David positioned himself alongside them and remarked, "You desired more." David's voice was calm as he said, "You wanted more. Let's see if this changes something." My knees trembled, not out of fear, but from a delicious thrill that coursed through me. The inaugural night unfolded with David stationed in the corner, arms folded, silent, merely observing. Jace approached me first. His energy was intense, unfamiliar, and overwhelming. Jordan entered the moment slowly, with an intensity that made me question everything I knew about myself. That night spiraled into something chaotic and consuming, emotionally and physically disorienting. I responded in ways I never had with David. Emotionally raw, exposed, confused. And through it all, David never stopped watching. His expression remained a mystery. His eyes, dark and inscrutable, remained locked on every sound that escaped my lips, though none of it was for him. When it ended, I collapsed on the carpet, breathless, lost in the aftermath. Jace offered me a glass of water. Jordan leaned close, his actions intimate and almost theatrical. David remained silent. He effortlessly offered me a towel, pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead as he always did, and then ascended the stairs to find rest. Yet, slumber eluded me. My body thrummed with a vitality I had long believed was lost to me. I experienced a profound sense of being revered, possessed, and desired. The following day, I anticipated the arrival of guilt, the sting of shame ready to strike, yet neither made an appearance. Instead, I kept seeking the feeling that made me forget myself, even for just a moment. David continued to return them, at times individually, at other moments as a pair. At first, I thought he was trying to save our marriage, but soon I realized he wasn't trying to salvage anything. He was watching me fall apart, piece by piece, and recording every second of it with his eyes. I began to alter my style of dress. I began dressing in ways I had previously only imagined, exploring a part of myself I once silenced. It wasn't rebellion. It was awakening. On a particular evening, David inquired, "Do you still desire more?" I replied, "Indeed." He stared unflinchingly, then turned to me and uttered the iciest words I had ever encountered. "Maybe I'm no longer your husband," David said. "Maybe I'm the one arranging everything now." A hush fell over the room. Initially, I found it amusing. I initially believed he was jesting, yet he was utterly sincere. In that instant, a transformation commenced, not solely within the confines of our bedroom, but throughout the entirety of our marriage. David ceased to be my partner and began to regard me as a mere product. The temperature in our home changed, not colder, not warmer, just transactional. At the stroke of midnight, my phone began to buzz, breaking the silence of the night. My phone lit up. They reached out again, as if I was expected, as if I was no longer in control. I had transformed from being David's wife into something altogether different. A woman, ensnared in the process of being booked, scheduled, and exchanged between two formidable figures, reminiscent of a closely guarded secret. And the most peculiar aspect was that I found it enjoyable. No, I yearned for it. David ceased all physical contact with me. He ceased his attempts to keep me close. Forehead kisses are a thing of the past. No, my affection for you precedes the demands of work. He transformed into a figure of detachment, precise and methodical, reminiscent of a corporate executive overseeing a brand that had long since lost its charm. He began instructing me, cold, transactional, as though I was no longer his wife but part of a routine. "They'll be here at 7. Be ready. There's someone new." It was on that night that I encountered Caleb. He was larger, more imposing, and possessed a deeper complexion and voice than the rest. Caleb said little, but his stare unsettled me more than words ever could. He looked at me like I was both myth and mistake. As the night drew to a close, I found myself aching, drenched, and utterly at a loss for words. I found myself drifting away from my own identity. David started receiving money. Where it came from, I didn't know at first, but the implications crushed me. The news had traveled far and wide. My husband, the very man I vowed to share my life with, was peddling me away. David looked at me without a hint of emotion. "You wanted this. Now they're lining up." The reflection in the mirror had become too difficult to face. Not out of shame, but because the woman gazing back was a stranger to me. I possessed great power. I was desired. Yet I harbored another essence, a shadowy one. Something I no longer knew how to shut off. As the sun dipped below the horizon, David gestured for me to take a seat. He filled our glasses with red wine, rich and robust, carrying a hint of bitterness. He gazed at me and remarked, "You are the most vibrant you have ever been. Admit it." I said with a knowing nod. He was not mistaken, yet a tightness began to coil within me, a sensation I could no longer dismiss. I inquired, "What compels you to undertake this?" He wore a sly grin. "Initially, your transformation ignited a spark within me," he said. "But now I find myself captivated by something even more profound. I perceive strength. I perceive control. Should I gain mastery over you, then mastery over all is within my grasp." The wine slipped from my grasp. Fragments of glass lay scattered across the kitchen floor, crimson, like the vivid splash of life upon my soles. It was on that fateful night that I came to a chilling realization. I had not merely betrayed my husband. I had stirred a beast within him, one that didn't roar, but calculated. David began setting up recording equipment. He called it art, but it felt like a trap I never saw coming. I watched it all unfold, as if I were in someone else's body, trapped in a movie I never auditioned for. I let out a piercing scream. I implored. I instructed him to cease his actions. Yet David merely smiled and replied, "You cannot stop now. This was initiated by you. You desired something greater." Yet, deep within, a fragment of my being still found pleasure in it. The juxtaposition of ecstasy and dread split me apart. There came a day when I found myself weeping in the shower, huddled in a fetal position like a small child. The following day, I found myself returning again and again, unable to disconnect from what was happening. I ceased to meet with my friends. I turned a deaf ear to my mother's calls. I even missed my own niece's birthday celebration. Those encounters began to define my days. They became a cycle I couldn't break. Something was breaking inside me, yet I didn't feel it until it was too late. Then, everything transformed the moment I opened the door to our guest room closet and discovered meticulously labeled folders. March, Marcus. April, Tyrone, May, Caleb, and not to forget, Zion, June, VIP submissions. Inside the closet were folders, each labeled with names and dates, each containing evidence of what I had become. Every folder contained DVDs, USBs, and printed contracts bearing my name. I found myself stripped of the title of wife. I had transformed into a business. I faced David head-on. I let out a piercing scream. I lashed out, fueled by fury and helplessness. He remained unyielding. He gazed into my eyes and declared, "I created something from your hunger. You claimed I fell short. I crafted something that surpasses my own needs, just for you. Now, it seems, you are the object of everyone's desire." My body quaked, not out of fear, but from the weight of understanding. I was no longer his wife. I was the creation of his design. That night, I carefully packed a bag. My hands trembled as I pulled the zipper closed. In my moment of need, I reached for my phone to summon a cab, only to discover it was absent, along with my purse and the keys that would grant me escape. David lingered in the hallway, his arms crossed defiantly. He declared, "You are not going anywhere. You are meant to be here now." I hurried to the guest room and secured the door behind me. I perched on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down my face. And still, a terrifying calm lingered over the entire house, like something was waiting. Yet, beneath the surface, an undeniable truth lingered within me. This was far from the conclusion. The journey had merely begun. Weeks had passed since that fateful night when the men David introduced entered our lives. Since that moment, a profound emptiness settled within me. There were no moans, no cries, not even whispers, only an enveloping silence. A profound, acrid stillness permeated the very walls of our dwelling, spreading like an insidious affliction. David found himself consumed by an all-encompassing obsession. He had transcended the role of merely being my husband. He had become the distorted maestro of my waking hours and restless nights, while I was the spectacle he observed in an endless loop. He started to document every detail. Surveillance devices in the bedroom, monitoring equipment in the bathroom, and even discreet microphones tucked away in the kitchen. He explained that it was a matter of protection, that he aimed to maintain everything in a state of control. But I knew better. He didn't want to protect me. He wanted to possess me completely. He began to extend invitations to a greater number of men, introducing fresh faces, some older, others younger, more rugged and tougher. On a particular night, I found myself counting 5. One night, there were 5. I couldn't even cry anymore, just watched from outside my own body. I wasn't a person. I was an exhibit. A numbness enveloped my body. My spirit had separated. I had ceased to be a woman. I existed as a spectacle, a source of thrill, a captivating project. Yet, beneath the surface, a tempest was gathering. Initially hushed, then crescendoing, ultimately igniting. Fury, directed not only at David but also inward, at my own shortcomings. I requested an abundance, and it was granted to me. Yet the cost was exceedingly steep. It was a Friday, a day that held the promise of the weekend ahead. Chilling, overcast heavens. David had stepped out. He had ventured to the gym. Or so he professed. I found myself solitary in the living room, draped only in a robe, enveloped by an unsettling silence. My reflection in the darkened TV screen appeared foreign, red-eyed, broken-lipped, and fading. Then, my gaze fell upon it. His laptop, left ajar on the kitchen counter. He had always taken it with him, but not today. I approached it cautiously, as if drawn toward a loaded weapon, and opened the folder labeled Pleasures. What I witnessed made my stomach churn. Countless videos featuring various men, captured from different angles on different nights. Even more disturbing was the fact that they were uploaded, sold, and subscribed to. My husband had betrayed me. I was no longer merely a wife. I had become property, and that was the final breaking point. I fled, not just in body, but in mind, heart, and spirit. I sought refuge with a neighbor I scarcely knew, a woman named Linda, who had once left a casserole at our doorstep years prior. I revealed it all to her. The men involved, the intricate setup, the deep-seated betrayal. Initially, she remained quiet. She wrapped her arms around me before reaching for the phone to call the police. 2 hours later, as I had anticipated, David was apprehended at the gym. The authorities uncovered it all. Visual recordings, storage devices, financial transactions. He had profited more than $300,000 from my humiliation. I was guided back into the house to gather my belongings. I strolled by the bedroom that had once been my throne, where I was revered like royalty, only to be cast aside like refuse. I walked through the kitchen, a space where moans had once resonated more powerfully than any melody. I paused before the mirror in the hallway, the very one where I would meticulously apply my lipstick before each guest arrived. I gazed into my own eyes. I felt no shame. Fury coursed through me, furiously enraged. Yet, beneath that fury, I sensed liberation. David finds himself confronted with charges, serious exploitation, illicit surveillance, mistreatment, and an extensive array of offenses too distressing to enumerate. My phone buzzed with an unexpected call from his lawyer. I declined. He no longer merits the sound of my voice. I have embarked on the journey of therapy. Genuine therapy. I relinquished the house. I wished to avoid the walls that held too many secrets. I secured a quaint studio apartment by the lake, a place where anonymity envelopes me. I have transformed my hair. I ceased to don lace. I've begun to put pen to paper once more. Not tales, not verses, but revelations, unfiltered, visceral revelations. Initially, I shared my truth online under the veil of anonymity, yet the responses I received transformed everything. Women from every corner of the nation shared their stories with me. In the company of others, I found my salvation. To each of you who are observing, absorbing, and navigating your own concealed narratives, I wish to express this. Seeking more does not render you malevolent, yet lacking the awareness of when to cease, that has the power to obliterate you. Greed consumed me. I acted with folly. I yearned for fire, and fire is what I received. Yet, in that journey, I reduced it all to ashes. At this moment, I am reconstructing, each brick laid with care and a touch of anguish. This time, I shall embrace peace. Neither power nor pleasure, only tranquility. Because peace, I've learned, is not the absence of fire. It's choosing not to burn yourself again.